All right. This is Augustus Corbett, and I greet you today with a bit of sadness. We have all seen that this has been a bloody 4th of July week or weekend. There have been shootings all across the country, particularly in African American neighborhoods, and that's distressing to me. That's distressing to me for a number of reasons. One of which is, in 1987 and in 1993, I had the unfortunate experience of eulogizing two of my younger brothers. One was 15, one was 20. I preached both of their funerals. So shootings hit me a lot different than they do a lot of other people. But that's not the only reason. I am also a practicing lawyer. I represent a lot of young Black men who have been involved or accused of being involved with violence. I've seen the autopsy pictures. I've seen the family devastated because of one of these killings. I've seen young men be walked away handcuffed to spend the rest of their lives in prison. I was also a public school teacher. I saw the school to prison pipeline that often results and feeds this carnage that we're seeing. So yes, this hits me different. This hits me very, very different. And might I add, had it not been for the grace of God, I too would have been a victim of gun violence. No question about it. I was heavily in the streets. But again, God's grace allowed me to see 61 years, and hopefully I'm able to see even more. So yes, these gun shootings, this violence among young black men really strike me different than it does a lot of people. So again, thank you for tuning in, and I have a few thoughts that I want to share about these shootings. Before I do, let's watch a little video about the shooting that occurred in Baltimore.
WJZ continues to stay on top of the mass shooting in Baltimore's Brooklyn neighborhood. This is the surveillance video we promised you at the top of the show. This came from a neighbor who lives on 8th Street, which is right around the corner from where the shooting started. You can see dozens of people running through the streets to escape. Once again, 2 people are dead. 9 more remain in the hospital after a total of 30 people were shot in the area. You can count on WJZ to continue covering this story for you and bring you updates as we get them.
2 people killed, 30 injured in this shooting here in Baltimore. 2 people killed, 30
It's really
people
weird.
injured.
The chat on
That's just amazing. Just a second. That's just amazing that that is happening in our communities. And it wasn't the only shooting. There was also a shooting in Philly that also left a number of people dead. And then today, I awoke to the sad news that there had also been a mass shooting in a predominantly black neighborhood here in Fort Worth, Texas, where I live. I live in the DFW area. So 3 shootings in the space of about 3 days. Multiple people dead, multiple people injured because of a shooting. A shooting. This is like the Wild Wild West. This is like a battle zone. This is like a war zone. This is abnormal. Do not become just used to this, because it's abnormal. But we also can change it. I'm convinced of that. I'm convinced that we can change this, because the root of all of this is the trauma that these young men are experiencing. Why else would they be out here killing each other like this? Did you not know that homicide is the leading cause of death for black males between 15 and 44? Homicide, the leading cause of death for black men between 15 and 44. Homicide. That's not true with white men. That's not true with Asian men. That's not true with Latino men. That's only true with African American men. Why? There are a host of reasons, but I believe big contributing factors are poverty and trauma. The trauma and poverty that has been produced from centuries of systemic inequities. Because, think about it, the white community is not experiencing this, nor is the white community experiencing high levels of poverty, and certainly no systemic inequities. The Asian community has not experienced those things either. The Latino community has to a certain degree, but still not on the level that we do in our community. So those are contributing factors. And of course, there are spiritual causes behind this as well. But I just don't, I don't see this as normal. I don't accept this as normal. And I feel my call, our call, especially us African American men, that's who I'm really talking to right now, quite frankly. I'm talking to black men who have a responsibility to address problems facing our community. What are we doing? Are we waiting on white people to solve our problems? Are we waiting on white men to solve our problems? Is that what we're doing? Is that what 400 years of systemic inequities has taught us? That we wait for other people to save our children? Is that where we are? That's not manhood. That's not masculinity. That's not taking, you want to talk about taking personal responsibility? That's not taking personal responsibility for our children, our community. This is our job. This is what we must do. We must solve this issue. Three shootings, multiple people dead in our communities over the last 3 days. It's almost like you are afraid to even congregate with our folks anymore. Cookouts, family reunions, funerals. You're subject to get shot. You're subject to get shot at because a bunch of us are meeting and a whole lot of our young men are traumatized. They're traumatized. They feel no one cares about them. They feel America hates them. They feel their opportunities to thrive and survive are non-existent. They feel their lives are meaningless. They feel that they may not live to see the next day. So with all of that going on, feel abandonment and all of this, with all of that going on, pulling the trigger is an easy thing to do. That's the kind of historic trauma that our community is dealing with. And it's really being played out with young black men. Yes, I have a unique seat. I really do. Having eulogized two of my younger brothers, having come to the point, you know what, when I was 16, I never thought, when I was 14, 15 years old, there were times I didn't think I'd see 16. And at 16, I didn't think I'd see 21. And that's where a lot of these young men are. So you put trauma, poverty together, along with the ready availability of cheap guns. This is what you have. Trauma, poverty, guns everywhere. This is the result. Our neighborhoods are in crisis. You have heard me say this now for years. You have seen me on YouTube. You've seen me on Facebook sounding the alarm. Telling you that Black America is in crisis and has been in crisis since we've been here. But in terms of our children, our youth, our men, that crisis has increased. Democrat politicians, they like to blame guns for this. And as I said already, there are too many guns in our neighborhoods. There are too many guns in America. And you've heard me say many times that violent people should not have guns. But this problem is bigger than guns. Again, trauma, poverty, systemic inequities, all wrapped together, put guns in the hands of people who have experienced those kinds of issues, and you're going to see what we just watched on the video. Shootings where people have to run for their lives from young men who are hurting, who are traumatized, who are angry, who don't care, whose lives they've told mean nothing. They've been told. And that's the mayhem that we get. So guns is an issue, but it's bigger than guns. Guns in the hands of young men, as I just described, that's where the danger's coming from. But to see the country, including Democrats and Republicans, they don't want to deal with that because that requires a major, major, major investment in the African American community. Major, major, major investment in the African American community to address the poverty, to address the trauma, to help these families with mental health issues, to help these families come out of poverty. See, we don't want to address that part. We just want to talk about guns. And again, guns are part of this problem. But if you got young men who have hope, young men with a vision, young men whose lives matter to them, young men who want to make something out of their lives, those young men will shun guns and violence. Scripture says where people has no vision, there will be destruction. They will perish. Where there's no vision, the people will perish. The people will throw off restraints. The people will do all sorts of things because there is no vision in their hearts. All they see is gloom. All they experience on a daily basis is poverty, hunger. Some of these young men come out of families where most of them come out of families where the mother is the only one who's in the home. She's working 10 hours a day. The kids are coming home to an empty house, an empty refrigerator. Dad is nowhere to be found, doesn't care, who's dealing with his own trauma. So why is that kid? Why does he have any reason to make, productive decisions? Why? Society has told him he means nothing. His life means nothing. There are two categories of black men that I'm calling on yet again to step up. Step up. One, clergy. Where are you? preachers? How are you allowing this carnage to happen on your block, across the street from your church, down the street from where you claim that you serve an almighty God? How are you coexisting with this carnage when you claim that the greater one is in you, greater than he who's in the world? How are you not involved? How are you not investing a considerable amount of your resources from your church budget into reaching these young men, these little brothers of ours? Why are you not involved? Every Sunday you take money from their mothers. You take offerings and tithes from their grandmothers. Because yes, it is their sons and grandsons who are out experiencing these outcomes. Yet very little of your church's budget do you invest in trying to save these young men. Athletes, these rich athletes, signing these $80, $90, $100, $200 million contracts. You should be in your communities where you play ball, where you make all that money, or where you are from, investing heavily in these neighborhoods, in these young men. They idolize you. They want to be you. They strive to be just like you. Please invest in these neighborhoods. Please invest in these communities. You got more money than you can ever spend if you spend it wisely. Invest in these communities. Invest into these young men and women. Build schools. Build charter schools where they can get a proper education. Build recreation centers. Build STEM centers where they can learn science, technology, engineering, and math, and be prepared for the future. Give them hope. Show them that you care. Show them that you love them. Show them that you've been, many of you, exactly where they are. Athletes, get involved. Well, you may say, I'm doing this and that. Do more. Do more. You're rich. You got plenty money. You're making $1 million a game. You're banking $1 million per game, some of you. Some of you more than that. One game would be enough to change so many of these kids' lives. The money you make from one game could change these kids' lives. So yeah, it's a good thing that you come along after some of them get murdered and pay for their funerals. Why not spend the money before the shooting, before the death, to try to prevent the shooting? You know, a lot of people have things to say about Charles Barkley. But I can say this about Charles. Charles has invested a lot of money in HBCUs. I believe, if I'm correct, I believe it's in the millions, $7, $8 million, $9 million. Charles has invested in HBCUs. And I'm sure some of the other athletes are doing something too, but we need more. These kids need more. That's clear from all the shootings. They need more, much, much more from the athletes, from the clergy. I really don't understand how clergy are silent. I don't get that. Jesus talks about Jesus in Matthew chapter 25, verses 31 through 46. Jesus talks about how for the least of those in society, we do it unto him. And when we don't do it for the least of those in society, we're not doing it unto him. How, therefore, can we not invest large sums of our church's budget in reaching the neighborhoods that we're called to serve? Yeah, okay, I get it. You love a good conference. You love a good, shouting time or a good sermon. But isn't all that to empower you and your congregation to go and turn the world upside down, to impact your community? Those young men who look just like you? Wasn't it someone in your community who took out the time for you and changed your life, and that's why you're on a great path today? Why not do that for our young brothers? We need all kinds of programs in our community. We need mentoring programs. We need positive role models. I remember very well coming up, my role models were drug dealers, card sharks, pool sharks, hustlers. Those were the guys that I grew up idolizing. Those were the guys I wanted to be like. We need positive role models, mentorship programs. We need brothers going into the schools and just being present. I saw a brother on Facebook the other day said that he was about to start teaching elementary students, a black man. I thought that was so awesome. So awesome. Because the younger we can get to these kids, the better. Right? Frederick Douglass said it's easier to rear strong children than it is to repair broken men. So the quicker we can get to them, the younger we can get to them, we can keep them off that path. I'm almost in tears. If we can get to them as little fellas, as little guys, we can keep them off that path. We need to teach these young men how to resolve their disputes peacefully, without guns. They need to understand the consequences because they don't. I'm telling you, I am an attorney. I represent these young men in court. They oftentimes do not understand the consequences of their actions. They're oftentimes too young. They haven't been taught. They haven't been raised to understand, to truly get it. It's only when they are in that jail cell, handcuffed, around hardened criminals, where they no longer have their freedom, and the prosecutor's talking about 30 years, 40 years, then they get it. Then they understand, oh my God, my life is over because of the dumb decision that I made to pull out this gun, and at the behest of a friend or because of some kind of beef, I started shooting. Then they get it. I can tell you that young men are not mature at 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Young men are not mature at that age. I can tell you personally that some of the decisions that I made as 17, 18, 19, 20, 20, it surprises me when I look back today. But it was because of trauma in my life, because of my inability to make good decisions at that stage of my life, because oftentimes of influences in my life, and so on. It almost cost me. We can break this cycle. I think about a young man that I represented a few years ago. His name is Leonard. Leonard was 17 years old when he was charged with taking a gun to school. I said Leonard was 17 years old when he was charged, accused of taking a gun to school, right here in the Dallas area. And the court appointed me to represent him. The court knew my passion for young African-American men, and the court coordinator said to me, I was not going to appoint anyone else to represent this young man but you. He's yours. I called Leonard into the office there at the courthouse, him and his mother. His father was not involved. It was just Leonard. I called them in. I said, sit down. I was stern. Leonard originally is from California. His father, by the way, wanted involvement, but they just didn't have a good relationship. I told Leonard, my name is Augustus Corbett. You will refer to me as Mr. Corbett. Sit up in your seat. Look me in my eye when I talk to you. Shake my hand. Look me in my eye, square in my eye when I talk to you. Do not come to court with your britches hanging down. That's the way I started that relationship. Because I was going to do what was necessary to try to save this kid's life. But I had to set parameters that had not been set in his life. I made sure he understood that you're now graduated to the felony district court. You've graduated to, at that time, Judge Gracie Lewis, presiding judge of Criminal District Court number 3. They used to call her Lock 'em Up Gracie. I met Judge Lewis when she was a juvenile judge. And she would appoint me to a lot of juvenile cases. She kind of helped me when I first started learn how to represent these young folks. But she did not play around. I told him, I said, Leonard, you are in one of the toughest courts in Dallas County. This woman will send you to prison as sure as I look at you. So do not come in here sagging. Do not miss court dates. I don't care if you have to crawl to get here. Get here. Because you have graduated now. You're not in the principal's office. You're not dealing with your mother. You're now in the criminal justice system. And you're facing 20 years. I asked Leonard, where are you from originally? He said, Cali. I said, first of all, I don't know nothing about no Cali. It's California. Leave the street lingo outside of the courthouse. So now, where are you from? He said, I'm from California. And I asked him, have you been living in California here in Texas for several years? He said, yep. I said, it's yes, sir, going forward. It's yes, sir, no, sir. For me, it's yes, sir, no, sir, for the judge. I had to get him prepared for where he was. It's different now. You are accused of taking a gun to school. Do you understand how people see that? This is as serious of a charge as you can face. People are concerned about violence in school, and you are accused of taking a gun to school. Now, I started working with Leonard because there were a whole lot of things in his life that were out of place. And fortunately, I also was dealing with a fair-minded prosecutor. White prosecutor, by the way. His name was Greg. If Greg were to hear this video, Greg, I thank you to this day. I said, okay, Leonard, I'm going to help you not only in the court, but I'm going to help you outside the court. So I went and I spoke with the manager of, I can't remember the fast food chain. I went and personally spoke with him, and I asked him to give Leonard a job. Here's why. Obviously, being charged with taking a gun to school, Leonard got kicked out of school. So now we got this 17-year-old young man who's charged with a serious felony, and he's kicked out of school on the streets. So he needed a job. How do I know that? Because I'm a high school dropout. I dropped out in the 10th grade. So I knew what Leonard faced on them streets. And I knew something else about Leonard that I was able to discern very early. Leonard was not about that life. Most of these kids are not about that life. They're just in those neighborhoods around those kids. They're immature, they're traumatized, and so they sort of end up in these spaces. He was not a gangster at all. I got Leonard a job. Then I took Leonard to the military recruiting office. And I got a recruiter to commit to allowing Leonard to go into the military if we can get a certain result from his case. Another thing about Leonard, when he needed the job, Leonard needed identification. He didn't have any identification. He didn't have a driver's license. He didn't have a state ID. Therefore, the manager said he has to have that before I hire him. I'll hire him based on your word, Mr. Corbett, but he got to have the ID. So my wife and I took Leonard to the DMV to get his state ID. See, this case here was about more than court. While I'm working on his court case, I'm also working on his life. That's why the court coordinator appointed me in the first place. She knew I would do that because she know I care. She knew I saw Leonard in myself. We took Leonard to the DMV, and the DMV said, well, you got to have some sort of ID. So we had to take Leonard back home, reset his appointment for another day so that he could try to get his birth certificate or something. Now, Leonard has family in the area here, but for whatever reason, they were not going to take him to the DMV. So we had to step up and do that for Leonard. So he was able to get his birth certificate, went back to the DMV, and was finally able to get identification. Now, that's something that you and I wouldn't think twice about. Identification, what's the big deal? I mean, everybody can go and get an ID. No, everyone cannot. The DMV was about 30 miles from Leonard. We finally got him the ID. And now, not only did the ID help him get a job, but the ID also helped us get him into a GED program. I know about the GED program because that's what I have. Again, I didn't finish high school. I got a GED in the military. So I took Leonard to a GED program and got him enrolled in a GED program. Again, my wife and I. And this was back when Chloe and I started working together. So me, my wife, and Chloe took Leonard's situation on as a personal ministry. So we got Leonard cooking. We got him cooking, working on his GED, got state ID for the first time in his life. I also prayed with Leonard to become a committed Christian. And fortunately, the charge against Leonard was dropped. When I talk about us being able to save these young men, that's what I'm talking about. It can be done. They want that. They want someone to just simply show them that somebody cares. I don't say any of this to toot my horn. I say this just to demonstrate to you that with time, with effort, with money, with just some resources. All of that, and you know how long that went on? You know what else I did for Leonard? I picked him up for every one of his court dates. For 2 years, I went miles out of my way to pick Leonard up for court because he couldn't get there. Again, family were not going to take him. And if he missed a court date, the judge was going to throw him in jail. And if the judge threw him in jail, then he couldn't do his GED, nor could he keep his job. So I went 20 miles out of my way to pick Leonard up and take him to court for 2 years and back home. That saved Leonard's life. It likely saved his life physically. It likely perhaps saved the lives of other people. Because he could have went off and got involved into a whole lot of other things. But that case was dismissed, and Leonard started a new life. And Leonard is not unique. We can save these kids' lives if we get involved. These kids are traumatized. They live in broken families. They are like Leonard. That's why I walked you through Leonard, my dealings with Leonard, because they are like Leonard. We can save them. We can stop these shootings. We can greatly reduce them. I would love the opportunity, whoever did the shooting in Baltimore, whoever did the shooting in Philly, whoever did the shooting in Fort Worth, I would love to be able to ask that young man or young men about their lives. And I guarantee you there's certain things that are common with every one of them. I promise you. That had somebody gotten to them before that moment where they are pulled out a gun and started shooting, that could have been prevented. But again, as I close, this is not something that we need to wait for the police, the mayor. They should be doing it. Don't misunderstand me. And we need to pressure them to do it. And not just with more cops, but with investments in these neighborhoods. But until then, this is our community. These are our kids. And us men especially need to get out here and save them. Some of you, God has graced you to make it out of the ghetto, to make it out of poverty. You're doing well. You're making good money. You got a good life. You live in a nice home. You live in a good section of town. And you do nothing to help those kids who are in a situation like you may have been. You do nothing. You do nothing. Shame on you. You do nothing. Brothers, you do nothing to help these kids. Or you can do a whole lot more. a whole lot more. Please share this video, like it, comment, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. There's a crisis in our community, and we're the answer to it. We're the answer if we'll just open our hearts and care. I am Augustus Corbett, and you are listening to this either on the Defiant Lawyers YouTube channel or maybe The Gap. I don't know. But thank you for listening. Let's save these kids. We can stop these shootings, if we just get proximate. Bryant Stevenson talks about being proximate to where these situations occur. Let's do it. I'm out. Peace.